Welcome to MRE Uncut, where we'll give you real and practical insights into the real estate scene in Melbourne. We'll discuss what's happening in the industry, all backed by MRE's history of over 30 years in the game. With that said, let's jump into this week's episode of MRE Uncut.
Welcome to another MRE podcast. Stephen Fitzsimon here. We've got Peter Hooymans and Jared O'Donnell.
Hello. Thanks, mate.
And we're talking today about something that we were pretty proud of achieving a few years back, where we were able to list a bit over 1,000 properties in a year. And that's a huge boost to any rent roll.
I was going to say, for those listening, that's 1,000 new organic listing, like net growth.
Yeah, not purchased from a...
No.
No.
Net growth 1 year.
Yep. So it was a big year, still recovering a bit.
It's a big year. It's huge.
But it came from a variety of different sources. And so hopefully the today's little session will provide some food for thought.
We're just going to tell it how it is. I mean, so from, it's a while ago, but my memory was being so driven to grow the rent roll from, 300 to 700 to 1,000. And then we got to 1,000 and we're like, right, how do we do it? And I clearly remember trying to find the decision makers of two major developers that had two substantial projects underway. And I remember one was a property developer in South Melbourne. They had a project. It was about 400 and something apartments, of which we knew around 250 were rental guarantees. So I found his details on LinkedIn. Got the details. I was reverse searching. I was Googling my brains out to get, and I finally got his number. And then I remember just ringing and hassling and yes, please, can I please come and see you? And then I remember one time I rang, and he kind of like muffled the phone, and I could hear him say, "Mate, either get this agent in, or I'm going to tell him to get stuffed because he's driving me insane." And I could hear him, and he came back on the phone. He goes, "Oh, mate, okay. Come in Thursday, 10 o'clock, I think you remember." And then we got together and we made sure that we were going to deliver the pitch of pitches. And we walked out of that meeting with a listing of 250. They appointed us on the spot as what we would call back in the day PPM, Preferred Property Manager.
Yeah.
Not more than a month or so later, similar but different developer in Paran, I think it was at the time. And I remember saying to you, you got to get the details, and your sense of urgency is similar to mine, but I got impatient, and because
today it was too long.
Yeah, I needed it that hour, and I remember 10 o'clock at night finding this guy on LinkedIn. Again, I was just on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
you
texted to me
6 or 7 years ago. Yeah, I said I found it, and then I rang him and I said, "Mate, can I take you to lunch?" And we went to lunch. Again, I'm trying not to name names just in case people don't want to be mentioned, but we went to lunch at Bistro Gitan in Paran. And it was
wasn't that a Greek place in
No, it was definitely in Paran on the corner. Anyway.
Yeah. Good steak.
Yeah. And we had a long lunch, a couple of reds, and did our pitch. We had a phone call back within, I don't know, a week. Yep, you're on. That was 300. So we had 250 in one, or was it 280 and 300 in another. So it was 500 pieces of stock that nobody else had access to. We got the owner's details. And that, I think then we started to worry about how we're going to service this.
Well, essentially it wasn't mum and dad investors who have one property that we were talking with. We were sort of shortcutting it.
I think like the bit though, when I look back now and I think, like you can still do that today. Like if you're in Sydney, these buildings are being built, or not so much in Melbourne anymore. They've just stopped a little bit, but there's so many other places where so I'd encourage agents to have a crack at going to the source and doing this, because that's all we really did. There was no secrets. People would ring us and go, what's the secret? What's the magic? And I was like, we rang them up and we took them to lunch and drank a lot of red with them, and we built the relationship.
Trust.
It wasn't just, the networking piece. We also had capability and capacity, and we had some great ideas and marketing strategy. But I think the other one that springs to mind was a big one we did in the city, which was around 300, and that started as an intro again. You might have.
I started on a smaller project.
You chased that guy, yeah. And we ended up having lunch at Coda Bar. I can name the restaurant. Good restaurant. We used to do a lot of business deals there. And the lunch started at 12. And I'm going to say it ended between 7 and 10 because I can't quite remember.
I would have run away at that point.
You did. Yeah, you left. You left me to the wolves, which is fine.
Yeah.
But needless to say, we had a great day. But again, a day later, or might have even been, I think they appointed us on the day. Does that ring a bell?
I don't think too many things ring bells.
Yeah,
after about 4 o'clock on that day.
But it was close, right? It wasn't long. We weren't waiting months.
Well, we already had a relationship.
There was
with
no
those guys,
board decision. It was just like, yeah, okay, here you go. Here's 300.
Yeah.
So there was 800 in the short space of time.
Yeah.
And then we had the other one.
Well,
we could say the building. The building was the William.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, we could just say that. And again we got to the source. We got the GM. How do you feel about having fantastic? Let's have lunch in the city.
Yeah.
So white tablecloth.
Lots of drawings. Lots of diagrams.
Lots of that. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was 200.
Yeah.
So there was 1,000.
Yeah. And then we had a little bit of losses through natural attrition, but then we picked up the normal mum and dad investors on the side.
But I think the interesting part was when being appointed as the preferred property manager, it was completely okay and legit for the developers to give us the owners list. Because ultimately, also I think as well, I'm doing all the talking here, so you jump in, but some of these were rental guarantees. So in the case of the rental guarantees, for anyone listening, it's obvious, but the developer wants to minimise their exposure. So how do they do that? Well, appoint the agent who can get the best rent. If you get the higher rent, then the top up between the guarantee and the market is lower.
The challenge is the developer is a developer, and they're not an expert on the rental market and who achieves the highest rents.
Well, not to mention that they're mostly hard asses as well.
Well, they're looking at the dollars and cents.
Yeah, yeah.
And
they weren't the easiest guys to deal with.
No, you got to talk the language.
They were tough.
If you can't talk the language of what they're looking at, then it makes it challenging. And then I think we're assisted through the marketing background of being project sellers and being able to apply that to the leasing campaigns.
So on top of the cold calls to list whole buildings, towers, 15, 18, 25 stories. Yes, we were selling projects, quite a lot of projects at the time. They were just a bonus.
Yeah.
50 years, 70 there, 60 there. I mean, I think I don't know the year, but maybe it was 2015 or 16 or 14, I don't know. And we had yourself and Charlotte Pascoe. I think Charlotte will mind us mentioning, now CEO of Stockdale Lego. Fantastic. She's done a great job.
Awesome.
And you and Charlotte listed 700 in a year. To think 700.
There's a lot of phone calls, a lot of work, but the challenge was lessened due to the fact that there were a bunch of rental guarantees, and then coming on as an easy path of least resistance for an owner to choose an agent. We've got a competent agent with a great marketing package at a time that they needed an agent, providing the solution in front of them. It was an easy pathway to choose, and they're still with us today.
So we had first mover advantage. I think that there's no doubt. That's which is always good. But if you're listening and you're a BDM with another agency or in another state or wherever, Perth, there's a bit of stuff happening. New South, bit of stuff. I think this approach still applies.
I couldn't agree more. It doesn't matter. We were lucky because the scale of developments was huge. And if you're a real estate agent in a country town that is growing, but you don't have that level of scale, it's talking to a developer that's got 4 because
Yeah.
there's probably he's doing a knockdown rebuild, putting 4 townhouses up. Probably 2 of those are investors. So it's the same strategy that you're applying, but it's just picking a bigger development. If you don't have the bigger development, you go smaller development.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I think if you're in regional centres, like the ability to scale, like I've been listening to, a fantastic agent on the north coast there for McGrath, one of the McGrath absolute superstars. And I do think in my head, there's a lot of houses and coastal, and there's the towers aren't there, so it would be more difficult for an agency like that to scale.
They're still picking them up. Like in those estates, there might be a 300 house estate. If you can create the relationships, that is the best time ever to market yourself as an agent, because there's 300 properties coming up and all of them need an agent. All of the investors need an agent. So if you're there, you're professional, you've got the scale, you've got the capacity to be able to lease them out, and that's an essential part.
I think that was our big leverage, wasn't it? Really was we had 8 or 9 people in
we had
leasing.
a team.
Yeah, we had a strong.
We called it the
leasing team.
development leasing
Because
team.
if you remember when we leased, I think it might have been EQ Tower. We'd done a lot of pre-marketing and registrations of interest. I remember the photograph of
everyone in the foyer,
200-something people in the foyer, and then a queue going up a Beckett Street it was incredible.
It wasn't seen before.
No, it was. So it was sort of like it had a real buzz and a vibe to create more interest in the building, which just led to more faster leasing but to do that, I remember we needed, I'm going to say from memory, it was 8 or 10 people on the ground on that day.
Oh, it was more. Yeah, more than that.
Yeah.
The idea of being able to lease a project, like put it this way, if you're in a smaller real estate agency and you're leasing 30 or 40 properties a month, and it may be smaller than that, but if you're doing 30 or 40 and you're going to pick up a project and it's got 100 apartments in it, well, the expectation is that you're not going to be leasing 30 or 40 properties a month. You're going to be leasing 30 or 40 properties in that project on top of the 30 or 40 that you're doing. So you've got to have the resources to be able to process the applications required to be able to do 80 leases. You've got to have the resources to be able to set up all those keys, organise all those condition reports, the whole
So you sort of got to resource up before you, which we did a bit of that. We invested, we did take the punt, spent the dough on the resourcing. So that, but I want to flip this to something else, because we went through this phase of buildings, we were selling projects. It was BDM Nirvana, really.
Yeah.
And then we had this movement and still have this movement. In fact, the movement is growing rapidly into BTR.
Yeah.
And that hasn't stopped us.
No.
Because the guys doing BTR still need the same expertise that the guys who are building the apartments that were renting to investors before all of the investor rules changed and made it harder.
They've got more skin in the game than anyone.
Yeah. So we've been winning solid business in the BTR space and applying great expertise. Maybe we should, it'd be good to cover. So that's an opportunity. Obviously, we're giving our competitors an open door here onto what we're doing. But each man for themselves, you've still got to go in there and be great at it, and you've still got to go in there and be able to deliver. But BTR is, that's your specialty. What do you see there?
Yeah, I think it's very easy to say you can do something. It's very hard to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the battle. The majority of agencies that are out there are on a smaller scale, and the challenge of trying to ramp up and put those resources in place that are required to lease a project of a substantial size is not easy. They've all got to be trained. They've all got to be skilled, and you can't pull them off the work that they're currently doing because you still have that work to do.
But if you're an agency of 6 people and you've got 2 PMs, right, and there's a project going up around the corner that's 40 or 50, you can still have a crack at it and give it a good shot, no problem.
Yes, you can have a crack at it, but you may fall into the challenge of approaching it like having 40 rental properties that are one-offs, and that doesn't work. It takes a different approach.
Different.
Yeah.
So if they want to know about how to do a project, should they ring you?
I'd talk to them.
If they're a BDM?
If they're
because we're looking for BDMs, aren't we?
We always, good BDMs will
so
always
if you're a BDM and you want to know the listeners, ring Steve.
Yeah. If you want to be able to
Google him, he's online.
If you want to be able to develop from listing one property, with one client, then there's those opportunities. But I think the biggest hurdle that you've got is it's one thing to lease, it's another thing to deliver. And if you don't deliver, then your reputation's shot.
I think what's good about the BTR, though, once you've got the business, okay, you win the business, you lease let's say in the case of one of our dearest and most favourite clients, I won't say the name, it's about 60 properties and it's been 3 or 4 or 5 years, I can't remember. As they come up, we've got to be on the ball, stay on the game and make sure that we're looking after it like it was our own.
Yeah.
Like we would look after any property, of course, that we manage, but this client's so particular and fussy and like so detail-oriented and meticulous that really I feel like with that group, there is no margin for error.
I don't think that there's much of a margin of error with any of the BDR clients, which makes it more challenging. So if you look at it historically, if we bring on a development, it's normally brought on through a relationship with the developer, and then we create relationships with the 200 individual owners that had bought in that project. And then after the building's finished, we've got 200 individual relationships and the developer relationship, which are separate.
Yeah.
With a BTR, you're bringing on a relationship with one individual, one group, and you've got to maintain that relationship for the entire duration of it. And if you break down that relationship, well, then you lose the entire management. So there's higher risk. And the banks recognise that. So the aspect of the...
But is BTR harder? Is it easier to list 200 individually or easier to list 100 BTR?
Oh, I think it's similar.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think the BTR is going to put you through the ringer if they actually know what they're doing.
The two developers that spring into mind again, not naming names, are both incredibly meticulous guys.
Yeah.
Well, family businesses really, and they're like.
And it's right to be. It's such a significant part of their annuity income. So I think you'd be crazy not to.
And how we're going on traction with, I know we've got multiple BTRs we're working on, and so again, for anyone listening, the opportunity out there is huge.
Yeah, a lot of them do it themselves. Or aim to aspire to do it themselves, but the portfolios are very small to begin with. You've got some international players that are out there that are sort of like, we'll do it ourselves, and they'll bring in their expertise from outside. There's also a lot of players that think they know what they're doing and are trying to set up businesses, and some are doing better than others.
But that said, we've still got at least half a dozen extremely strong, viable leads of scale that we're really close to.
Yeah, they're going to come.
We're obviously not going to say what they are.
No,
because,
but they are,
and there's a good chance we'll get those.
Yeah, they're relying on the skill set that we've.
I suppose the point I'm trying to make here is that because if I was an agent listening to this, I'd be going, but that was back in the day when they were building all these towers. Yeah, sure. Was that easier? Yeah, because there was a little bit more stock. But so now we've just flipped it into another. What's the next scalable space?
Yeah, I think that's the question. The scalable. It takes a lot more work and a lot more time to in 1 month put on 200 properties, or over 2 or 3 months put on 200 properties if you're doing it with individual owners. Yet you get the scale so that you might be be harder to get the deal. You might have to put 3 months into getting the deal and 2 months into getting it leased out. But in 6 months, you've put on 200 properties. And if you compare that to putting on 200 individuals, it takes longer. More so than it being necessarily more difficult, it takes longer. So if you can be spending the other 6 months putting on 100 or 50 or 80
just your
individual
day-to-day
day-to-day, then you've put on 280 for the year. and happy days.
Yeah, you need a bit of everything.
Yeah.
But I think like that, again, for listeners, the takeaway for me is, so here we are down the track, 4,000 under management, and I bump into an agent or a friend. Oh, you guys, you were so lucky, and you were this and you were that, and you had the relationships, and I'm like, no, we didn't.
No, we just
We bloody cold called.
Yeah,
we cold called.
Yeah, that old.
At least 1,000 are cold calls.
The friend of old BDMs.
That's the truth. So
you just got to ask the developer.
Get on the phone, boys.
Yeah,
and girls.
Well, that's it.
Well, actually, our BDM teams, is it all girls now? No, it's nearly all girls.
Three,
I'm just going to say that.
It's 3 boys. And
okay.
Yeah, so we're
Get on the phone.
Get on the phone.
Pick up the phone.
Yeah, that's what it should be called.
Righto. Thanks.